Welcome everybody to Forza Horizon 4, and today we're taking a look at the 1965 Ford Transit. Now this is the first generation of the Transit, produced between 1965 and 1986, with a facelift and new engines coming about in 1977. Introduced to replace the aging Thames 400E, which had neither good enough performance or handling. And this was a departure from other European commercial light vehicles of the time, with its American-inspired styling. Had a broad track which gave it a huge advantage in carrying capacity, and it drove like a car due to its mechanical components being adapted from Ford's car range. All of this, in some respects, especially in terms of the fact it handled like a car and had performance like a car, and its huge carrying capacity made it in particular popular with bank robbers of the time. In 1972, the Metropolitan Police reported that 95% of bank raids had a Ford Transit involved, which is no surprise. You can carry 1.75 tons, still do more than 70 miles an hour, and handle like a car. So it's no surprise that it was hugely popular with bank robbers. But it was also hugely popular with the public by and large as well, especially with people who were needing a van that was not only enjoyable to drive but also versatile and easy to drive as well. And this certainly was. Not only did it have a good broad track to obviously improve carrying capacity, but because it had a short nose due to having a short engine, it meant that there was more room for not only the driver but also in the rear as well. Also had these really rather nice sliding doors to get in and out easily, along with a step so you could climb up. And it had 3 seats in the front, which is also very useful. Got a driver, then you got 2 spare seats for your workers or anyone else you want to be taking around with you. And it's got a huge amount of space in the rear, as you'd expect. So no trouble whatsoever in terms of getting a lot of stuff in there. Again, that's why it was popular with bank robbers at the time. But yeah, the reason why the front of the car is so short is because it has such a short engine. Now it has a 1.7 litre V4 engine producing 73 horsepower and 91 pounds-feet of torque. Now the V4 engine, though it was used in other cars from Ford at the time, like the Capri, it's not all that much of a popular engine type really. There's only one other car on this game, for instance, that has it, and that's a Lancia Fulvia. Now that is obviously a more performance-orientated vehicle, but this engine has its own uses in the fact that it is such a short engine. That means that it has very little in the way of intrusion in terms of the cabin or taking up any more room in the back. Because the Thames 400E that this replaced had a forward control layout, which meant that the driver was right up the front, right up to the windscreen and right up to the bumper, etc., with the engine either underneath or adjacent to the driver, which was technology at the time, but with the engine right up front but also being quite short meant that you didn't have any noise or smell of gasoline or anything like that permeating into the cabin, which made it a much more enjoyable experience for everyone involved. So British classic icon, quite frankly. The Transit is still going strong to this day. It's probably even more popular now than it was back in the 60s, and there's plenty of reasons why. They were innovators at the time, and they continue to be so now. Pretty much everyone that knows a van, has a van, or drives a van, will always say that the Transit is the originator, and everyone else is just basically copying them in a lot of ways. But nonetheless, let's get out onto the open road and see just why this was so popular. So yeah, even though this is no performance machine, it's certainly understandable why this was so popular with bank robbers. Now granted, this isn't the most powerful version. You could get a 2 litre V4 or a 3 litre V6, and in Australia you could get a 3.3 litre inline 6, which I think in the 70s, when it got new engines, had a 4.1 litre inline 6, which was nicked from the Ford Falcon. So plenty of choices in terms of engines, and if you did want to get away from the cops, you would certainly go for the more powerful V6 version. But this 1.7 litre version is still plenty fast enough. 0 to 60 in 31 seconds, and it will do a top speed of 71 miles an hour, which I know doesn't sound all that much, but it's certainly enough for the period that this was out, and since the motorway speed limit of 70 mile an hour came into effect a few years later after this car was released, it's yeah, still able to not only carry a hell of a lot of you know you know objects and whatever else in the back, but it's also still able to do 70 miles an hour, which is essential, quite frankly, in terms of a van like this. No point trundling around at 40-50 mile an hour when you've got a if you're self-employed, working or anything like that. It's really good that this can do that kind of speed while still being able to carry whatever you need to be carrying. So yeah, I know it's not going to please a lot of people that this car is on the game, because obviously it's not all that quick. It is a little bit of an oddity, quite frankly, considering this is a racing game, but it is a British icon. It's part of the British landscape, and it is set in Britain, this game, after all. And yeah, you'll be pushing your luck if you're going to ever find a road where one of these isn't driving around. Now granted, not this version, but obviously newer transits are still hugely popular to this day, and yeah, a lot of the 90s and 2000s versions are still going as well. So yeah, it's really rather understandable why this is on the game. Might not be the most exciting car to drive for some people, but I do enjoy driving it, and it is really rather fun to hoon it around some dirt tracks and the like. But yeah, still a really rather decent car to drive, and yeah, it's an interesting one nonetheless. You really can't look at British car history without ever coming across the Transit, because yeah, played an important role, and yeah, still does to this day. And yeah, this was an innovator at the time. A lot of vans from the 50s and 60s, like I said, had forward control layouts, which might well have been useful at the time, but yeah, paled in comparison to this design, and yeah, obviously proved worthwhile considering how long this first generation lasted. 21 years. Did have a facelift obviously, but that is still a hell of a long time. And yeah, like I said, the Ford Transit has been going strong ever since, and it's been the best selling light commercial vehicle for 40 years, so that in of itself says a lot. Nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.